as you know, this program here is quite different than our usual in-class session where we're building and designing and kind of working elbow to elbow with people. But we still, want to use this time right now to have a good conversation about how we can apply the concepts of computational thinking and design thinking to the blue economy and to how we approach really complex issues in the blue economy. And that might be a really nice time with some of the work that you're doing with the Oceans 11. One of the other things we'll do towards the end of this is model an authentic decision-making activity that uses computational and design thinking and really deep thinking skills, and we'll apply that to our theme of aquaculture using a really relevant and regional ocean issue as provocation for learning for us. So that's going to be sort of the focus of the next 50 minutes or so together. We have a lot of goals in this very quick 60 minutes together, and I'd like to sort of model the computational thinking terminology or wording as we kind of go through these objectives, and think about, if we really want our young people to have a better understanding of the ocean and of the blue economy, well, then we need to start with that regional relevance, which is why we're working from some regional challenges and examples. And if we want young people to feel connected to the ocean, then we need to anchor that in real world experience for them, something that's regional that they can identify with and see in their own backyard here. And if we want them to be thinking deeply about complex ocean issues, then we need to teach them those strategies for how to think deeply. I think there's a lot of examples in our world right now and in our media right now of very shallow thinking and not a lot of great examples of deep thinking, though we do see some examples of that happening right now. But also considering our reactions to what that deep thinking looks like, because we're not always comfortable with it, with changing ideas and new information and people switching their opinion on something as new information comes and evolves. We tend to reject that and see that as flip-flopping instead of recognizing that that's what deep thinkers do as they get access to more information. And then finally, if we want young people to feel curious and inspired about the mysteries and the potential of the ocean, then we do need them to explore different types of resources and activities that will engage them in different ways. Some are attracted to, the big charismatic, whales and sea turtles and so on, and the ecology side. Others are more attracted to the technology or even the economics of the blue economy. And so providing more of a range or even inquiry-based program or activities that kind of tap into each of those, then we can tap into the interest levels of a lot of different students. As I said, I do want this to be interactive, so please jump in at any time, and I'll try to remember to pause and see if you have any comments or questions as well. So Megan, these are the resources I was talking about. The taking, making into classrooms, you would have gotten that in person. You would have both the digital and also the paper copy of that. Wave of the Future is a book that I just wrote this spring. I wrote it sitting at my kitchen table while I was sitting there in isolation with my family. And it's a focus on the sustainable blue economy. There were no real books out there to explain what a sustainable blue economy means to young people. It's available in French and English. It's also available in interactive, so online versions where you just click and it takes you to videos, takes you to activities, takes you to quizzes, and then also the print version, which is helpful for people who don't have great access to really reliable internet. And I wrote these with sort of grades 4 to 6 in mind. The content or the writing level rather is more directed at that level. But as I was releasing these chapters by chapter, I actually used them with my own kids who were in grades 3 and grade 9, and they went through them. They did some activities together. We actually have some videos that Anna took of them doing some of the activities in the book. Where actually they did one of the turbine activity that you did, and they also did a shipbuilding activity that's in there. So there's a range of real STEM activities, like real science content, a lot of technology, some engineering activities, and then a little bit of math as well, as they're looking at how all that all this relates to economy and to understanding impact in a global way. Both were developed with Creative Commons, so they're free to share. Please do share them with your colleagues. They are being shared through the Department of Education. I'm not sure how well they're being shared, but hopefully you've seen them. And as I say, they're free to share and to use and to photocopy and do whatever you like with them. And I really wrote The Wave of the Future with families in mind, thinking about people who are trying to teach their kids at home. And this provides a lot of opportunities to do that. It's also available, I should say, it's still in the chapter by chapter. So if teachers want to assign just a chapter to their students and work through some of the activities, you can go to our website and just find the chapter and assign that as well.
And Sherry, maybe as you pause, take a breath, I put in the chat, Megan, the link to the Royal Roads website, which may seem totally counterintuitive, except on that site are all the miscellaneous handouts and black line kind of things to support the design thinking and some of the instructional strategies that were too difficult actually to put in the Ocean Toolkit, but can just be downloaded. And all of them are in Word as well as Creative Commons PDF, so that you can customize them, because I think it really does support secondary pedagogy if you take it up in terms of how to support thinking and change the instructional practice. So I encourage you to copy that link out, because as we know, when the session's over, the link's gone.
Yeah, thanks. I did get that, and I just wanted to say two things. Number one, I appreciate the accessibility of this, because there's nothing more frustrating than trying to find stuff and it's pay for this and pay for that.
Yeah.
And I think that it's very generous of you to do all that work and share it, and I appreciate it. I will pass it on, and I know the students appreciate it. And secondly, the reading level and stuff, you said it was more directed junior high or lower, but the oceans courses in Nova Scotia high schools are often poorly called a dumping ground for students like who need a science credit but aren't necessarily scientists, and part of their gaps in science in the past are because of inaccessible language. So it's much appreciated, and I have no problem using it with my older students, because they are people. My students generally are students who want to do hands-on stuff and are good thinkers and mechanically minded and would probably have a great career in the marine industry, but just need something that's accessible and ignites their interest in it. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, you're welcome. And actually, when we were designing even the imagery and the icons that we're using in it, at first we had little kids as the two people on there, and then I said, let's make them teenagers so that it doesn't feel like a little kid's book. And I think that, a grade 11 student would read this and not feel like they're reading a little kid's book. It's not written in that like super, super simple language. It's not, kind of condescending in any way. I think they would have no problem reading this and getting a whole lot out of it. So that's great. So, why focus on the blue economy? What is this push? And, even prior to COVID, activities in the blue economy were already ramping up globally. You've probably heard about investments here in Atlantic Canada and Ocean Supercluster and the Ocean Frontier Institute, and lots of investment in different initiatives and different projects and research and so on that are all aimed at advancing ocean technology and research around the ocean. And now, especially as we focus on economic recovery in Canada, the federal government has announced that they are investing heavily in blue and green tech. So technologies related to, environmental issues generally and sustainability in our terrestrial economies, but also and especially in our ocean economies. They're really seeing huge opportunities there. And so, another thing to keep in mind as well is that for too long, industry and ecology, they've been kind of pitted against each other. They've been polarized and seen as being at odds with each other. And I think now there's a growing awareness of the role that industry can and really should play in a sustainable blue economy that focuses on, technologies for remediation, for better harvest of the ocean's resources, for better observation and understanding of what the ocean offers us, and how to make use of her resources without depleting her, and with giving back at the same time. And that's really what the blue economy is. It's aquaculture in particular is an industry that's oriented around these kinds of goals, and that also addresses really salient issues that are meaningful to young people nowadays. because so many of our young people really are much more globally oriented than we were when we were younger. But issues like food security and preservation of the wild fish and seafood, and the beautiful animals of the ocean, and then also a social movement towards more nutritious food and more accessible ocean proteins for more people globally. And at the same time, we're also dealing with unprecedented global issues like ocean acidification, ocean plastics, and pollution. And this really pulls all these things together. It's a really interesting kind of topic that ties all those together and does so across STEM and even across STEAM as well. And so just, before moving on, I just want to reiterate as well one other thing, which I said back in Port Hawkesbury as well, which is there really is just one big ocean that touches all coasts, and it's the lungs of the world, and it's the dinner plate of the world. And we've learned, or we understand the mistakes that we made with our terrestrial economies, and this is the opportunity now for us to do better with our blue economy and train a whole new generation of young people to be thinking more about the future and more sustainably about it.
Sherry, one of the things I just noticed, Megan put in the chat, which one of her sons is doing a joint degree, engineering and ecology, and Megan and I were just having a little exchange about how interesting it is now that, in a sense, it's these joint degrees that are really, and this sets you up to the next slide, but are really embracing the notion of problem finding and connecting design and other ways, what we might have in the past thought of divergent thinking, but they're actually connected in a joint degree because the problems are not siloed by discipline. The problems we're facing or the challenges we're facing are actually joint and interdisciplinary. Just thought I had to share that little side chat we were having. Megan and I were enjoying.
Where's he taking that program, Megan? I've not seen that combination before.
Actually, he's starting at St. Effect, and he was just picking his courses this week. Normally, they pair engineering with a physics or a chemistry science degree if you want to do a joint. But he is interested. He's a real environmentalist, and he really is interested in doing something with a lot of like what you're doing. Although his focus has primarily been terrestrial because we used to be dairy farmers, and he's got a real tie to the land. And for his summer job, he's actually working on 2 vegetable farms that grow for farmers markets. Yeah. So, but his focus is on like community development in this idea of promoting sustainable change and practices and that kind of thing. So he's not quite sure the avenue of engineering he wants to do, but he knows he wants to deal with climate change and environmental sustainability and stuff. So I was telling him all about the thing in Port Hawkesbury, and I was really excited. I said, that's a place you should go look for a job someday, because I said, this is what they're doing, and he was thrilled. It was really exciting to see that. And I wanted to say, I really agree with the word you keep using there is opportunity. Like, we're at that point in history where everything's kind of been laid low, and how we rise from those ashes is really be determined by who can push in those directions. So I'm glad of this.
Yeah, I totally agree. And that's really interesting. And, land-based aquaculture is another area that he might even want to consider. It's, still on the land, it's aquaculture, and it's farming in pens on land. And, huge opportunity there, especially around revitalizing a rural community and building that self-sufficiency. And I think with the geopolitical climate and with global pandemics, we're seeing a lot more interest in building that kind of regional self-sufficiency. That might, be an area that really connects with him as well. If he ever wants to, if you want to connect him with us, if he ever just wants to talk or explore that as an idea. And then also we now offer internships through Cove with our different ocean tech companies. And so he might want to reach out to us and just see about the opportunity to do that. We have still 5 engineers, and speaking to your interdisciplinary comments there, we hired intentionally an interdisciplinary cohort of interns. So 5 are engineers, The other 5 came from NASCAD, from design programs, from business programs, from computer science programs. And then we deploy them out in interdisciplinary teams to tackle some of these issues within companies and develop technologies. And as an example, one cohort right now is working with a very small company down in Yarmouth who is designing a more environmentally friendly trawler system, because fish trawlers they just wreak havoc on the seafloor. This one floats above the seafloor, but it's also exploring light technologies with light to attract the right fish and discourage the fish that they don't want, so that you don't end up with bycatch challenges. And it's amazing. There's like a really interesting way of integrating animal behavior with technology, with ecology and eco-minded solutions. And that might be something that he can relate to.
Yeah, that sounds fantastic. I think when I register for that the thing in August, I might take the 2 of them along just to say hello, like not necessarily to participate, but they'll be around. And
yeah, absolutely.
I think both boys would look at that. Hugh had been working on with Minus Pulp and Power, I think is the name, and they were looking at doing hydropower and stuff, and wave action and things. They had a variety of stuff. Anyways, it was his first exposure into that. So I think they'd both be interested in looking to that. So thank you.
Yeah, great. Megan, when you register, just send me an email and we'll, or just let me know. I guess Anna will see the registration, and we can set up a tour for the boys if you're going to bring them, for sure. So if you're definitely going to, just let us know. We'll make sure that someone's there to give them a tour.
That'd be fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. And so with these programs, Susan and I, we've designed these with sort of using a design thinking methodology or approach. And even though today we're talking about decision making, the design thinking process still really applies to that. It's very relevant to that approach, because it forces us or pushes us to kind of slow down that race to finding a solution, to thinking a bit more about purposeful design and purposeful decision making, about how we gather information, and then also thinking through the decision or the design, so that we're not creating a new problem from the solution that we come up with. And the example that we always like to use is this poor little Mr. Turtle here, who ended up with a straw up his nose. And this was tragic, seeing this poor little guy with a straw in his nose. And there were a lot of very, very swift reactions and very swift, decisions and solutions that came about from this. And one, of course, was banning straws, and then socially, chastising anyone who dare use a straw. But at no point did people really ask the question, what's the real problem here, and what are we really trying to address? Is it a behavior problem with turtles that we need to maybe be focusing on? Are they doing strange things with straws? Is it an issue about recycling, or our relationship with single-use plastic, or our behaviors around recycling or chucking things out and garbage? And in our solution of banning straws, did we create another problem? Because by not understanding what the problem was in a deeper way, it never occurred to anyone that some people might actually need those straws, that people with disabilities really rely on them, that people in hospitals really need them, especially the little bendy straws, and that even the paper straw solution isn't necessarily good for those particular groups of people. And so, again, we're addressing one problem, but that's not really what the core problem was, which again relates more to this reliance on single-use plastic and our throwaway habits. And then what was interesting was how another company decided to address this by redesigning their cups, and did so by designing a cup that actually has more plastic. And so, did it solve the problem of straws in turtles' noses? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe that was an anomaly that would never have happened again. Did it change our behaviors and our attitudes to straws? Sure, it did. But overall, I'm not sure that it highlighted the issue of single-use plastic as much as we wanted to. It's certainly not by solving the problem by adding more plastic to their cup. And so design thinking, it's really rooted in having a better understanding of what the problem was, so that we can move towards really purposeful design or purposeful decisions that are based and anchored in good knowledge and evidence-based kind of information. And it also pushes us to resist this urge to think in binary terms. And you know, we see a lot of that happening right now, and a lot of this binary thinking and playing out in the media as well, where, you know, you're either pro coal or you're not, or you're against it. You're either pro pipeline or no pipeline, pro vaccine, no vaccine, and you know, and the argument, the issues go on. There's a lot of these binary decisions happening, and we're seeing people taking a stand and not really taking the time to do the work of the deep thinking and the looking at all the data. And this is one of the things that we want to explore. And we think aquaculture is a great way to get people thinking about these deep issues. How, you know, and it's really up to us as well to model that slowing down, to not creating a binary decision, to thinking that it might not be A or B, it might be a combination of the two, or it might be something entirely different as well. That maybe we're giving people false options. And taking the time instead then to ideate around what all those options potentially could be. And we do see evidence of complex problem solving happening already in aquaculture, where the industry is exploring some really different and interesting alternative farming methods, from open pen farming, which is more traditional, to looking at land-based aquaculture, to recirculating systems that keep using the same water but filter it all out, and then take the filtrate the garbage that comes out of it, and you can use that as fertilizer. So what seems like waste to one becomes something good and becomes an add and a benefit to another. Looking at things like offshore open pens that have much more natural flow through of water, and integrated multi-trophic aquaculture, which is based on the theory of mixed crops and mixed species that naturally cohabitate together and that keep their own ecosystem in balance naturally. We see that happening in farms and terrestrial farms as well. And there's opportunity to do that in the ocean. But we're also seeing simple solutions to really complex problems, like, dwindling fish stocks. The demand for seafood is not going down, it's on the rise, but the fish stocks are in decline. And so how can we do more with less? And that this concept of do more with less is just a beautiful idea. The person who kind of coined the term was Thor, I can't say his name, Thigfuson, and he's in Iceland, and he leads their Iceland Ocean Cluster. And the idea for this is really inspiring, and it came out of their fishing community, where they said, we live in a small island community. We've done fishing for hundreds, if not thousands of years. But for a long time, they were only using about 40% of the fish. Cut out the fillet and throw the rest away. The rest is garbage. And on a small island, you end up eventually having to deal with the problem of all that garbage, and what do you do with that? And so they have found a way to actually utilize 100% of the fish. They use the fish bladders. There's a huge market for fish bladders, and they're very high value. They're about 20 times the value of just a fish fillet. There's a huge market for cod and halibut livers. There's a market for fish skin, and there's some examples here on this page of what happens with, they can actually make fish leather and make beautiful fashions out of this fish leather. And then also extremely high value products like collagen that they can make out of the scales and out of the bones. And this is a great example of really creative thinking, where they've gone from using 40% of the fish to using 100% and having no waste anymore. And so you don't need to take more fish out of the ocean. You just need to do more with what you've already taken out. And brought the value of a single fish from about $14 per fish to $100 per fish. So good business sense in it. A great example of solving a problem while also making money at it, and a great example of a sustainable blue economy. So this is an example of that deep thinking that we need to really be equipping our young people with these kinds of skills and these kinds of examples to get them thinking. And there are certainly no lack of great big problems, big global issues facing our young people. And certainly we don't expect our young people to solve these right now, but we can help them to develop and cultivate those deep thinking skills, so that they are developing more awareness of this, and that we are equipping them to be a generation that can start to tackle that as they go forward. And we, when we look at the kinds of skills and competencies that we all want to develop in our young people, these come from industry, and these align really well with the OECD skills, and also with the global competencies as well. And so many of them are not about knowledge holding; they're about thinking, and about how we can participate in collaborative thinking and collaborative problem solving. And as Susan's always saying, none of us is as smart as all of us. And really taking that philosophy, that adage, and putting it into practice with our young people, so that we're not continuing to repeat the mistakes that we've made with the environment and with our society. And so I'm going to pause here. I'm going to turn things over to Susan in just a second, but I'll pause first, and Megan, see if you or Anna want to add anything to that.
I had just put in the chat box, and I think I mentioned it in the spring there, the TED Talk, How I Fell in Love with a Fish by Dan Barber.
Yes, I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, I often show that to every class I can get to watch it, because they talk a lot about farming extensively versus intensively, and they converted an area that had been a swampland that was drained to make farmland for beef, and then abandoned, and they reflooded it and created an ecosystem. And they talk about measuring the success of their farm in the success of the predators that eat their stock. And it's such a great flip for people to get into that idea, like you're talking about, of that thinking more purposefully about the problem, and not jumping in too quickly with the easy fix, but looking at the bigger picture. So I appreciate that. I can see a lot of this being really useful. I'm always scared whether or not I'm up to the challenge of bringing that to the students, because I'm not particularly creative myself.
Yeah, well, and that's where, have a look at that Wave of the Future book. There's some ideas in there about how to do that. And you'd not expect it to be the expert on the aquaculture and on the big challenges, or the even the subject matter there, but certainly you can leverage us to connect with experts who work in industry, who can help with setting the stage and sharing some ideas around that, and then develop a design thinking challenge that relates to that. We'll talk a little bit actually about what the format of a design thinking challenge would look like, and how you might put that together as well.
Thanks.
All right, Susan, I'll turn it over to you.
Well, thanks. And Megan, I couldn't have asked for a better segue from you, because I think, one of the things that Sherry and Anna and I have been passionate about since the first time we started working together, which feels like forever in a good way, isn't about bashing what education has done. It's about recognizing what educators can do with the tools they have. And I'm just thrilled to have you here as a secondary person, because that's where the majority of my teaching was high school. And I think in some ways it's a wonderful group to work with. But on the other hand, you nailed it. It's a challenging group to work with, because they're critical consumers and they need our best game, So, I think when we start with Einstein, we're generally in pretty safe territory. And if you really believe this going forward, and if the pandemic has taught us anything, it's that rote learning really doesn't offer the answers you need to an ill-structured problem. And so it's why I think Anna and Sherry and I have made a rather interesting, diverse team, in that I love the ocean, but I'm not an ocean scientist. I'm just a passionate consumer of all things ocean. But what I bring to the game is this sense that design thinking and computational thinking are a way of interdisciplinarily, cross-disciplinarily way of inviting non-scientists or more vulnerable students, or at-risk students, or less academic students, but definitely clever ones, to engage with critical content in exciting ways. And so one of the people I've been thrilled to work with is this young knowledge holder from northern British Columbia, the Nisga'a Nation, who recognizes in her master's work that, core competencies have always served us. This isn't the time to be ignorant. This isn't the time to say, oh, any design will do, or a frivolous notion will help us. But it's to recognize that actually our core competencies are changing, and we're adding to our toolkit, not diminishing from it or choosing random things. And that there are processes that serve us well. And sometimes we forget to teach our young people a process that helps them to think and to come and use information in critical and important ways. So if we can go to the next slide, Sherry, please.
Sure.
So, why design thinking? I think something that's unique, and we'll talk a little bit about it in a minute. The unique thing that I think we are bringing to the table is not design thinking and then computational thinking, but it's a merger of design thinking as a 5-step process, as Stanford's initially considered it to be, supplemented with computational thinking as a process within a process, if you will, and using the very discrete portions of computational thinking to tackle the iteration and the prototyping side of the design thinking, and slowing it down to not just come up with a frivolous response or the wildest response or the most imaginative response, but actually a thoughtful response, a purposeful, a considered response. Moving on, please. So, Sherry said this a couple times, and this is, I think, where the bulk of my work right now is how do we help people, our youth and our colleagues, to learn to think deeply? And, sometimes, and you watch people, right? You watch people in uncertainty. Some people just grab for the quick answer, like, just tell me what you want me to do. Do you want me to wear a mask, or you not want me to wear a mask? Just tell me. And if you don't tell them accurately, or you don't stay consistent, they get very frustrated. And so we often call those guys shallow thinkers. Just tell me. Let me react to the situation. Let me take it on face value. Let me just look at first order consequence. I'll put a mask on. I won't be spraying. I'll take a mask off, whatever. But where we really need to go, and Sherry touched on this in the beginning, is what we're watching in real time is our public health people engage in deep thinking. As more evidence comes in, as we learn more, we're watching in real time what Aristotle said. It's an educated mind that is able to entertain a thought without accepting it. It's also, and if you take it a step further, it's that ability to hold two seemingly disparate points of view in your head at the same time and make sense of them. Not go yes or no, but to actually say, holy smokes, somewhere in there might be a bit of truth to each. And how do we figure this out? Thanks, Megan. Absolutely anticipatory. And that notion that we live in gray, that the answer is probably somewhere in the middle, but all evidence is important, and critical and creative thinking are essential. And so it takes me to my favorite book. And I've had the opportunity of going to the lifelong kindergarten lab at MIT a couple times. It is breathtaking. It's where Seymour Papert started out and invented Logo and started working with Lego company and whatever. But one of the things, and I think, Megan, I really love having you here as secondary, because, in elementary school, we say, oh, this is great, creative expression, creative thinking, and then we'll get serious, and by middle school, all of the fun furniture is gone, and it's all desks, and it's whatever. And one of the things that Sherry's reminding us is how fun it is to work with probes, how fun it is to put our hands on real science instruments and get to use them. And so Mitch Resnick from Lifelong Kindergarten reminds us that really the 4 ways, the 4 principles that help people learn are projects, passion, getting to connect with their peers, and play. And not frivolous play, but the play that allows people to learn. And that's what play is. It's how we navigate our world. It's how we learn to make friends. It's how we engage with our environment. So Resnick says, if we put these 4 together, we will create the environment that allows people to design, create, experiment, and explore, and then hold their knowledge in more important and significant ways. Sherry, if we could bump along here. So I don't know, Megan, how much you know about design thinking, and so I don't want to, overtax it, but mainly, design thinking, thank heavens, came to us, the folks in Stanford and Harvard helped develop this notion. IDEO, the company, the big design company, really honed it into a 5-step process. And what we find is essential is none of this process can be skipped. And none of this process is superfluous. It's not like something you don't need to do. And it's certainly not something that you would say, gosh, now we're in high school, we never need to do this again. We actually know that this aligns nicely to the scientific inquiry model as well, where we begin by empathizing. Do we totally understand what the problem is? And then begin to define it by bringing in data and resources and truth and facts and questioning. And then ideate from that, not ideate in a vacuum, but ideate from that and begin to prototype. And then one of the reasons I love this diagram that Sherry has up on the screen right now is it shows that it's messy. It goes all over the place. Once you ideate something, you may have to go back and empathize. Of course you will. And once you empathize, you're going to have to go define. So it's just a process that moves you through and continually through the activity. Sherry, next slide, please. So design thinking, it really is about supporting and encouraging and giving students time to hone divergent, convergent, and lateral thinking and find that they can all be positioned within your intention for the learning using a human-centered approach to this. And of course, the astounding thing is then it builds this mindset that's a growth mindset, that you actually have to think about things and be positive and have that attitude that you can achieve and you can go forward. And Megan, if I can take you back to a statement you said earlier about the students who are in your Ocean's 11, I bet some of them are a little battered by the time you get them. And this need to foster and support and encourage a growth mindset is just so critical. And what we've offered you here is the link to the TED Talk, Carol Dweck's TED Talk, because I think a lot of times, particularly in PD events like you've been in the last today and yesterday, people talk about it, but it's really nice to go back to the source. So what did Carolyn Dweck actually say? What was her research actually telling us about the growth mindset? So we'll leave you with that link and we'll go on to the next slide. And I said to Sherry, I'll be with her forever as long as she lets me use this slide in any presentation. Because I think the biggest purpose and what excites me about engaging youth with design thinking is, the world's a little grim right now. And I think if you're sitting there as a high school student, it would be very difficult to say that it's sunshine and light outside your door, even though it's the height of summer. So I think we have to introduce people and youth to the notion that design thinking helps us make meaning. And design thinking is a way of fostering and building optimistic attitudes towards things, because design is a mindset. And design, the act of making things better, more attractive, those kinds of things, is very different than design thinking, which is a process by which we get there. And, one of the best gifts I think Canada offers the world is the gift of its Massey lectures. And this one, In Search of a Better World, probably at the last chapter in the book, he says it best. If you want youthful idealism to move forward and you want youth to build self-worth, then it comes from doing something worthy with yourself and finding how to do that, finding that path, having that process to do it. Oh my heavens, that's where design thinking and computational thinking jump into play. And Sherry, I'm very mindful of the time, so I would encourage us to slip right down to the design. Yep, that one, please. And Megan, what we've offered here is this handout, and I know this sounds very pushy, but I would just download it. After years and years and years of working with questions and asking good questions, this little handout is a one-pager of just how to ask great questions. And I think it's just a lovely compilation of question prompts, good ways of keeping questions open. And I would just encourage you to download it and share it with everybody. So there you go. Where I really want to spend a moment or two are these next couple slides. And I think Sherry and Anna and I are really onto something here of connecting the dots literally between design thinking and computational thinking. And as I mentioned previously, actually, we can go back. Yeah, thanks. You know, people think they're different, you know, so we'll do design thinking over here and then we'll do computational thinking when we're going to do something else. And what Sherry and I and Anna are really beginning to explore is the convergence of these things. That computational thinking is a process within a process. And it really offers us a way of defining that problem further, of beginning to ideate and solving that problem and breaking it down into even smaller steps. And so the resource that's here, and it's another thing I would encourage you to download, Tim Bell's work on CS Unplugged, is a whole adventure into computational thinking with no computers. So the unplugged part is it's a totally offline resource using offline, just good computational thinking skills. And it's again, a Creative Commons thing and a gift. And so without belaboring all these points, the reason we like this notion of tying computational thinking and design thinking together is all these parts of logarithmic, abstraction, pattern, et cetera, these are all forms of computational thinking that can be used and applied in this alignment with design thinking. And so I think, you know, if I think one of the things I really passionately want to explore is this alignment and is this connection that makes computational thinking more than simply a routing for computer scientists, but a pathway for deep thinkers and strong thinkers who consider things in a different organization. And Sherry, I'll take this last slide and then I'll pitch it back to you. I think the reason that I feel cheeky enough to say that this is a pursuit worth undertaking, the alignment of the two, is the recent, and this came out last year, the OECD Learning Compass 2030. When this came out, it was like, duh, gotcha. It makes perfect sense. This comes out of the OECD, of which Canada is a member, and it's around how do you support transformative thinking and what are the competencies that are essential for transformative thinking, transformative learning. And if you look at the three, and I know it's a little hard on the slide, one is creating new value. Duh, that's the underpinning of design thinking. It's all the work Sherry was talking about, the blue economy, all those things. Reconciling tensions and dilemmas. That's the underpinning of Aristotle's ability to hold things but not own them, not just take them lock, stock, and barrel. And thirdly, taking responsibility. Nobody else is to blame. We have a role, we have a responsibility to make change. And so this link that we've provided here for OECD and the transformational learning competencies, I think it'll take your breath away. It's just totally exciting if you haven't had an opportunity to see it before. Sherry, over to you.
Great, thank you, Susan. I described this design challenge, and I said I'd kind of walk you quickly through what a wireframe of that is, and that taking making into classroom. At the back of that are a whole set of design challenges that all use the same sort of format. But what we're proposing right now is that you can also use that format to as provocation for a decision-making challenge. And it always starts with an overview that kind of describes the situation of the challenge, a design rationale, which gives you a bit more background, a bit more information, or provokes you to kind of interrogate some of the data that you've got or go in and find more information. It also includes a problem scenario. So this is, it's a definition of what exactly it is you're trying to solve or explore. Some success determinants that tells you, how it's going to be assessed, that basically lays out what the deliverable will be, so to speak, and then some parameters that outline what the constraints would be. And so, it's a great example of how we can provide an inquiry-based opportunity for young people to explore that deep learning and really put that into practice. What I did was I wrote a case study, and I used a big fish company that is in the news and has been in the news recently. I renamed it just to keep it, just so that we're not actually using their name. But the scenario here is that this is a big Scandinavian fish company that was coming it's a fish farming company that was coming to Nova Scotia and hoping to set up several new locations across Nova Scotia for open pen farms. And it's for salmon. And they would be bringing a lot of money to the local economy, a lot of jobs, but then also bringing these fish farms in open pen areas to very, very to areas that are well populated, or that people really appreciate their coastlines, like Digby and Ilmadam and so on. And so what we're trying to do with this particular decision rationale is that, the decision overall was, do we allow them into Nova Scotia? Do we allow them to set up these farms, or do we not? Again, binary choice. And what this design thinking challenge does is that instead it presents this as maybe it's not just a binary choice. What other options could there possibly be? How can we think through? How can we ask some great questions so that we can better understand the scenario? How can we make use of really good science and science data to help inform our opinion on this, so that we're not jumping to a yes or no? We outline here what the success determinants are. In this case, it means that all the people on the team need to be collaborating on this. They need to be finding different sources of information. They need to be, as I said, interrogating that data and asking them, is it valid data? Is it coming from a reliable source? What is the really meaningful and really salient data to this issue that we can rely on to help inform our opinion? And what are other questions that we need to ask ourselves, instead of just, is it in my backyard? Is that sufficient to say no? And where can we find more of that really good information? And again, this connects us back to this design and computational thinking, because we're getting them to empathize with an issue that is really relevant to them and relevant to their families and to their communities. We're pushing them to define the problem or the question or the decision, and then ideate around different options, that maybe it's not just A or B, that maybe it's C or D, or maybe it's a combination of several different things, and perhaps even propose an option for themselves. And then as you get more information, you maybe go back to that definition or go back to that empathy and appreciate another perspective. Oh, there's the Indigenous perspective on that maybe we didn't take that into consideration. Maybe we didn't take into consideration global need for fish protein. We were only thinking in terms of our own region, and go back through that whole ideation and prototyping again, and then propose a decision. And that's how you would use that same kind of framework to explore an issue that has social, ecological, economic relevance to us, but where the facts and the data are really rooted in ocean STEM. Anything you wanted to add to that, Susan or Anna?
You know what, you're right on the money, and I think the whole connection to all of this, Megan, and the thing that we just are so passionate about sharing with you, and I think you already get, so it's nothing better than talking to somebody who already agrees, is that if we ask students to think deeply, and we want them to be these concerned global citizens and these thoughtful, empathetic thinkers, then we also have to teach them how to think that way. And I think the error, and this is my previous teaching experience, we just assume people knew how to think that way. And what we need to do now is contemplate how we teach thinking as well as expose people to things to think about. So I think it's that marriage, it's that thoughtful marriage.
Great, thank you, Susan.